Now we're going to talk specifically about design research, what type of methodologies we can incorporate within our design research, and ethics. All of the ins and outs when we are conducting research, what we should keep in consideration when we're conducting it and putting it together. So, to start, what do we mean by research? Take a minute to think about the term research and what comes to mind. What are some common activities that happens within the research? And think of the different terms that you know or have heard of research. Maybe observational or interventional, experimental. What do you think are the difference between those types? Typically when we think of research, maybe we think of the science-y, someone putting things on labs and tubes and things that are way more over our heads. But it's not all that. Here we do a lot of user-centric research that can inform our design decisions. What are some of the common activities that happen within the research? For a lot of things, we may start with an idea that we want to explore, that it is a feasible one, or maybe we want to discover a problem to begin with, so we can then design something to solve that problem. Maybe we have a hypothesis and we want to prove it. So let's talk about specifically of what do we mean by research. So here is a quote. Research is defined as the creation of new knowledge and/or the use of existing knowledge in a new and creative way so as to generate new concepts, methodologies, and understandings. This could include synthesis and analysis of previous research to the extent that it leads to a new and/or creative outcomes. When we hear the term research, we often think about scientific, but it's more broad. We want to gain knowledge so we can apply it to generate new and creative outcomes. So, in the scientific method, first identify the problem, then we gather the data, make a hypothesis, test the hypothesis, and then figuring out if that new data agrees. If it does, then we may test it again, and if it doesn't, maybe we make a new hypothesis and kind of move forward. So this is kind of a rigorous research, and it is not often used in the design processes because we have a slightly different goal. Yes, we are identifying problems and gathering data, but we don't necessarily want to prove something. A lot of times it's discovery research. So we derive our research to gain general understanding of people's, of cultures, situations, interactions, and whatnot. So while our design research borrows some of the techniques from the scientific method, it is not scientific research usually. So now I'm presenting to you this pyramid that talks about building good decisions. Now this is any decision, even from what you're going to eat this morning. So all of the decisions start with data, the raw form of the data. Then after having that data, we have information based on that data. So we present it in different ways, maybe graphs, tables, but it doesn't have necessarily a narrative or an interpretation to the data yet. It's just the presentation of the data. Then we have intelligence. This is where we now analyze and interpret that information of that data. This is where we start to come in to create maybe artifacts, figuring out the evidence, seeing patterns and trends. Then we can start making some decisions. Is where we combine intelligence and evidence and qualitative data to present it to inform our decision making. Now specifically for UX design research gives us a more complete picture of what the user wants, needs, problems, challenges, pain points. That is our data. Then we create that data into something that we can understand. Maybe we summarize those findings into personas, user journeys, empathy maps, and other artifacts so we can help by first understanding that user. Then, multiple types of research findings can help us understand that people, culture, situations a little bit better and start informing some possible solutions. Then our design choices are made because we are confident that we took all of that data, information, and intelligence into consideration when we were making those designs. Now here's a quote by Steve Jobs: "The broader one's understanding of the human experience, the better design we will have." In all of UX design research, we are searching for the user's truth. What do they need or desire to accomplish their goals? What knowledge are they missing or will help them understand and shape the world in better ways? So this is where we start merging research and design and start making things for humans. Now you're familiar with this double diamond. I explained it in the last lecture, and although the screen is very, very busy, it has a reason for existing. But where I want you to focus on this today is the type of research that happens at the different stages of the double diamond. So we have generative research in the first diamond, formative research in the second one, and evaluative research at the end. So at the generative research, we want to understand the user and define that problem. In the formative research, is where we form our solution, where we come up with ideas, different features, different products, and then we build them. At the end, we evaluate that solution. How good was it? Do people like it? Is it being useful? Do people prefer something else? This is where we do that evaluation. Now I'm going to show you a quick video about different methods of UX research, and then we'll dive in a little bit more into them.
We all know there's an abundance of user experience research methods. Some user research methods are great at producing data and insights, while others support ongoing activities to get things done. There's something useful to learn in every single stage, but it's important to combine the right activity at the right place and time, depending on things like budget, needs, context. Let's take a look at the best methods and their corresponding key activities for 4 common stages of product development processes: discover, explore, test, listen. Let's jump into discover. The discovery stage is when you try to surface what you don't know, alongside uncovering what your users may really need. It's especially important to do discovery activities before making a new product or adding a new feature, so you can find out whether it makes sense to invest all those resources in doing the project altogether. Your goal at this stage is to validate and discard assumptions, and then bring those data and insights back to your team. There are 5 top research methods to utilize during discovery: field studies, diary studies, user interviews, stakeholder interviews, and any kind of requirement or constraint gathering. Alongside those 5 research methods, you should be finding your allies on your team, talking with experts, involving your stakeholders, determining what future success metrics look like. And then we have the explore stage after discovery, where your goal is to understand the problem space and how you're best going to satisfy your users' needs. Before jumping into this stage, I want to mention that you can use a lot of different research methods, especially here. It's important not to try to do all of them, but to start somewhere and learn more as you go. So what research methods are we using during exploration? We should be doing things like competitive analysis, persona building, journey mapping, design reviews, task analysis, potentially even card sorting to understand how your users group content. Alongside this research, be trying to understand inconsistencies, considering diverse contexts, and outlining long-term implications of potential new designs. And then we get to testing. We are using validation methods in this stage. We want to make sure systems we design work well for the people who will be using them. During this phase, you should be doing things like qualitative usability testing, benchmark testing, and accessibility evaluation. Test early and often with a diverse range of people, alone and in groups. Use ongoing strategic activities which can help you get ahead of future problems, especially during the testing phase. Do things like track usability over time, test with a diverse set of users, and be transparent with how that testing is going, delivering both good and bad news to your stakeholders and other team members. Now, towards the end of the process, our last stage in Listen, you'll be utilizing testing methods like surveys, analytics reviews, search log analysis, usability bug reviews, and frequently asked question reviews. Listen throughout the research to help understand new problems that have arisen and direct future efforts. Remember, this is all just a guideline. It's not necessary and would cost a lot of time and resources to do everything on every project. Instead, use a mix of methods and learn as you go to keep your efforts on the right track.
So we know that research informs all of the relationships. We have a direct connection to the user, and we want to understand how the user uses our product or maybe can potentially use the product. So the whole research that happens between the user and the designer, that generative phase, is where we're trying to understand that user. Once we have a decent understanding of the user, then we go into that formative research, is us with the object that we're designing. So the formative research that happens in that stage is to make sure that the object that we're creating meets the needs of the user. Then that object and the user then go through their own research to evaluate that it was the right thing to build for them, that it is working as intended, and that they are finding a good use for it. So you see in this triangle and how things are connected, how each of those phases comes back to us by the object being connected to the user being connected to us, and us being connected to the object that we're creating. Now, in regards to the types of research, you heard about this in the last lecture where we were talking about, there was a video at the end where we were talking about the different types of research and how it's divided. We can divide it in two big chunks: quantitative research and qualitative research. Now, quantitative research, by the name, you can tell that it's about numbers. Quantity, it's about numbers. So it is used to quantify the problem by numbers with numerical data or data that can be transformed into statistics. So we want to know how many or how much in numbers. It is used to quantify attitudes, opinions, and behaviors and other variables, but with larger samples, like how many people like this, how many people are not happy about this, how many people put something in the checkout card and didn't check out. So quantitative research uses measurable data to formulate facts and uncover those patterns in the research. Now, qualitative data, they're talking about qualities, which is opinions and behavior. So primarily exploratory research, and it's used to gain understanding on underlying reasons like opinions and motivations. It provides insights into the problem or helps to develop ideas and hypotheses for potential quantitative research. So here's a funny cartoon, but it helps us understand what the difference is. With a quantitative method, if you put ice cream for free, you would count how many people grab the free ice cream. So only 1 in 30 take the free ice cream. That's interesting. With a qualitative method, you would approach the person and ask them, what did you feel when you saw the free ice cream? You were excited or a little scared. Why were you excited? What would make you grab free ice cream? Why didn't you grab free ice cream? So quantitative is about numbers and qualitative is about opinions. So throughout the double diamond, what we know about what happens in the double diamond, we start with generative research, then formative, and then evaluation or summative research. So during the generative research, most of it is qualitative. It's the opinions, the behaviors. During the formative research, we want both of them because we get how many people like this, or is this a good idea, yay or nay, how many people will use this feature, and we also get opinions. And at the very end, it's mostly about the numbers. Like, did it increase our sales? Did more people check out? Whatever our metric is. Whatever our metric is. Now, even within that quantitative and qualitative, now we have attitudinal and behavioral. So, like the name says, attitudinal is about the attitudes. So, opinions and behavioral is about the behavior. So, things that they do, what they say and what they do. So, attitudinal, what they say. Opinion, the researcher is collecting opinions and attitudes and beliefs. This is most commonly collected by asking the participant for their opinion or attitude or belief about a certain topic. And if you're wanting to know if you get a reaction to your design project, this is what you would typically measure. In the behavioral, we measure observable behavior that a participant offer. This could be time to solve a task, path used to navigate, or a number or amount of purchases inside of a store. Basically, the researcher can gather behavioral data without interacting with the participant. If you're interested in the actions of a person that a person takes with your design object, this is it. So, if we put a matrix from the qualitative information on the left side, the qualitative research methods, to the quantitative research methods on the right, and then attitudinal on the bottom, behavioral at the top, you get this grid that clearly lays out the type of information that you would gather or the methodology that you would use to try to gather specific information. So if you want opinions and highly qualitative, you do interviews and focus groups. If you want highly quantitative, so how many, and behavior, we can do analytics on sales, or what is the clicking looking like, or A/B testing. How many people like this and how many don't like this or prefer. If we want something in the middle, you could do some unmoderating testing where you give a test and you can observe them, but also maybe ask some questions at the end. So anyways, this is a plethora of research methods that we have and that we will go in depth as the semester goes along. But we are going to employ different methods depending on what we want to find. Do we want to find what they say or what they do in quantity or in qualitative information? The two pillars of ethical research. How we're going to employ our research, we need to make sure that we are providing consent. So they want to participate and they can end their study whenever they want, and confidentiality. So we're going to keep their person confidential. So there are 10 principles when it comes to conducting research and having ethical research. So this comes from a code of conduct for researchers. So all of participation, it has to be voluntary, and it has to be informed consent. So you tell them, hey, I'm doing this study for this specific reason, and your information, it's completely voluntary. You can finish or stop the study whenever you feel comfortable or uncomfortable. You want to be straightforward and honest in all of the professional and business relationships. Be transparent with regard to the subject and the purpose of the research. Respect their confidentiality. Respect the rights and well-being of participants. Ensure no harm or adverse effects. Balance the needs of participants, clients, society, and the researcher. Exercise professional judgment in designing, conducting, and reporting the research. Ensure those conducting research have appropriate training and credentials, and protect the reputation and integrity of the profession, in this case, design. Now, a lot of times you're going to conduct the research with people that you know, or even if you don't know, you may have to collect their name, their phone number, their email, just in case you need to do any kind of follow-up on, let's say, an interview or anything else. You can keep all of that information, but you shouldn't report it. Like, no one should be able to tell who you were interviewing or making participate in a study if they didn't provide consent and you don't want to reveal their information. Now, there's also something, IDEO, the Little Book of Design Research Ethics, that it's available in the required materials. There are 3 principles in which researchers should adhere to: respect, responsibility, and honesty. So in regards to respect, we honor participants' limits and value their comfort. So you need to make sure that you're treating your participants as people, as collaborators, not just subjects. And be aware of the cultural expectations and sensitivities at play, and think if your actions are thoughtful and kind. In regards to responsibility, we act to protect people's current and future interests. So things to ask yourself: am I confident that our research isn't harmful to our participants? Are participants aware of the consequences that they've shared with me? Do I need their informed consent? Safeguarding information that compromise a participant in some way. And finally, honesty. We're truthful and timely in communications. Am I doing the best not to mislead the participants and leave them with false impressions? When and how should we identify ourselves, what we're doing, and the intended outcome of their participation? Some other specific issues. These are research areas where you must have a solid plan to address. So, incentive administration, fairness and convenience. This is if you're going to pay anyone or invite anyone for coffee or anything while you're conducting these. If you're going to give an incentive, you need to make sure that it's fair and convenient for everyone. You want to document informed consent. Ideally, you want to have a signature that they are consenting, and then figure out how you're going to gather the information, store the information, and who has access or limit to this information. How are you going to deal if you're going to use minor participants? Maybe you want to do something that it's related to toys or food for kids. How would those go? Are parents going to be present? Is everything going to be recorded? You have to think of those issues before you start administering any kind of research. Gaining consent to share specific information like quotes, permissions to recontact and communicate, and the activities that you're going to do for data collection that may be somewhat unusual, like home visits. So you need to keep all of these things in mind when you are putting your plan, like your research plans together. And be wary of the research trap. So no one starts a project without some reason, and if there is a reason to do research, is because maybe we want a desired outcome. So we don't want to conduct all of the research just for it to confirm something that we want to confirm. That leads to something called confirmation bias, when you're only gathering the research that helps your claim and not truly to explore. So maybe it's unconscious, but you need to make sure that you don't have any misrepresentation of the findings, and that you are using the data in a coherent story. So here's a few questions that are part of an interview. They're all wrong, and I want to discuss with you what are some of the things that are wrong with this. So the first one, what is your email ID? So it depends. For some things, this may be not ideal to have an email to begin with. because you don't want that information to be shared with someone else, or you're not, the email doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be collected. But really, question number 1 of 80, no one wants to answer 80 questions. So you may get very low like answers on this interview or on a survey, for example. We are the best rated car service stop in town and consistently receive 5-star ratings from users. How would you rate our service? So what's wrong with this? You're leading the question. So by telling them that you are the best rated car service stop, you're already leading them into rate you at a 5-star. So not only you're not going to have a truthful answer, but you're also kind of shaming them. If they don't give you a 5-star, you're telling them that something is wrong with them. Number 3, which is your favorite way to eat eggs? So on the surface, it doesn't seem like anything's wrong with this question. And it may not. It depends on the context. Out of context, why are you assuming that I eat eggs? Maybe I'm allergic. So you don't want to make any assumptions. This would be a good follow-up question if you're making a study regarding, let's say, breakfast, and you say, what are some of your favorite breakfast items? And then if they say eggs, then you can ask, what is your favorite way to eat it? But just assuming that they do, that is not good practice. How was your online experience? This is also not bad on the surface, but it's very broad. What part of the online experience? Like me connecting into the Wi-Fi specifically on your website? What part of your website is specifically? Like the information that I found or the checkout system? So this is a little too broad and it doesn't lead to a specific information that you may be seeking. To take forward your complaint, please answer. How unhelpful was the sales staff? Press 1 for least unhelpful and 5 for most unhelpful. Well, this one is just ridiculous. Starting with to take forward your complaint. So you're putting a barrier for them to be able to give you feedback. So you don't want necessarily barriers. And then not only that, then afterwards we have how unhelpful was the sales staff. You're painting it in a negative light, and it is confusing. So 1 for least unhelpful, 5 for most unhelpful. So how do I really rate this or scale this? Like most unhelpful, like what is? It's hard to answer, and I can't even tell what really being unhelpful really means. So let's see. Number 6, we have how helpful was our DSC team when you visited the store? Well, what the heck is DSC? So this is all full of jargon, so we don't know what that is and how the user would know. That is beyond me. So then the next question is, what would make this button stand out for you on our website? Also, it does not seem too bad, from a high level perspective, but our users are not designers. Instead of asking them, how would this button stand out? Maybe you test it. You create 2 different buttons and then see how many people click on it versus, on the other one. So this is just not a good question for an interview. So with that being said, we're going to test out our learning from this lecture and also use some of the required materials that I have provided to you to find what the best practices ethically are when we are conducting research. Now for the class activity and your graded assignment, I want you to take a look at the Little Book of Design Research Ethics. It is added in eLearning, so you should be able to find it there. And go through this book. Read it in chunks if it's possible. It's about 50 pages, but it has really big pictures and really big type, so you will go through it pretty quickly. And what I want you to do, as you're reading the book, write down what stands out to you. What are some of the best practices that you find in this book, and we're going to make a little grid that talks about all of these best practices. Now the grid, you're going to find it on Figma. It looks like this, and you're going to write down in respect, responsibility, and honesty about planning and preparation, gathering information, and using and sharing data. So you're going to use the stickies to be able to talk about the different practices and best practices that you found from that book. Now to work on this one, you're going to find a page with a student number that hasn't been claimed yet, and make sure that you rename the page to your name. Once you fill out the entire information, click and share and copy this link. This link is the one that you're going to paste on your submission for grades. And that is it.